Hey everyone, long time no see. I'm here to do the Letterman Sew Along for Lowland kids. I am going to do a lined version. This is my first time making it lined, but I'm gonna go through how you would do it if you don't line it as well, because it really doesn't make a big change in the directions. You basically do the same thing, you just make two main jackets, so if you want to make it lined, follow along for this. Like I said, it's my first time, so hopefully it goes well. But you'll be able to easily follow along even if you're just doing the regular version that it was designed to be. So here we go. Okay, so our first step is constructing the pockets. What you want to do is take your front pocket pieces, which are the slightly smaller ones, and then your binding, and you're going to fold your binding wrong sides together so the right side is facing out, and then you're just going to pin it along the straight side of each front pocket piece, and then you're going to sew with a 1/8 inch seam allowance, which is typically all Lowland patterns. You're sewing everything with a 1/4 inch, so just be mindful that you're only doing this with 1/8 of an inch. It's a really small seam allowance to work with, so make sure you pin if you need to, or use some kind of like seam tape or a glue stick even, which will just wash off the first time you wash it, just so that nothing shifts and that everything stays together nicely, and sew along the raw edge. Okay, so I just sewed the pockets with a 1/8 inch seam allowance. And so I did the binding. I folded the binding wrong sides together and then put it right sides together with the pocket and sewed with 1/8 of an inch. The next step is going to be to take your bodice and lay it right side up. This is just one side of the bodice. And then lay your pattern piece on top of it, lining everything up so you can see where your pockets are going to go. There's all these lines here, so depending on what size you make is where your pocket piece is going to go. I'm making 4 T's, so I'm going to mark off my pockets right here. And right there. And then I'm just going to kind of like lift this up and then throw a pin where that pin already is to mark it. There's probably a better method for this, but this is just what I do. Almost lost that one. Oh God. Okay. There we go. And now I'm just going to line up these so that they're kind of like facing each other, so that it's almost like a straight line and I can see where the pocket goes. There, so that's where it starts, where it ends. Now, your pocket piece is going to be a little bit longer than where that hole is, so you just kind of want to even it out. It's meant to be that way. You'll see when you flip it inside after fully making the pocket. So you just want to make sure that you're doing it kind of even. So here's where my pocket starts on one end, and the piece just goes about like 5/8 of an inch past it, and then same up at the top. This is where my pocket starts, and it's just going up about 5/8 to 1/2 inch past it. So this is with this right side up. Then you're going to flip it down so that it's wrong side. So it's right side down, wrong side up, and then just pin. This pin's really bad. Pin along the pocket. Okay, and now you're going to take it to the sewing machine, and you're just going to sew exactly over this line here that we already did, and you're sewing it to the bodice so it's right sides together with the binding piece sandwiched between. Okay, so, and then you want it so your pocket is facing downwards like it will when everything is constructed. That's how you know you have it the right way. So I'm just going to take it to my sewing machine, which you can't see because of the light. And I'm just sewing exactly over that same line that I already did. So you can see I just went over the line as best as I could in the same spot. Now, what you want to do, also I didn't mention this and I messed it up at the beginning, you only want to sew where the line was on the pocket template. So you don't want to sew all the way down to the bottom and you don't want to start all the way at the top. I did start all the way at the top by accident, so I'm gonna have to seam rip that a little bit. But yeah, just do it along the line where it shows. Next, you're gonna take your back pocket piece and you want it to be wrong side facing up, so the right side of the bodice and the right side of the pocket are touching. And you're just going to lay it along the seam here. And then you want to measure a 1/2 inch from this seam that you just did over, and that's where you're going to sew it along here so that there's a 1/2 inch gap between the two lines that you're sewing. So the pocket pieces are touching. That's not where you want the gap. You want the gap to be where you're sewing. So I'm going to take it over to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew from about like a 1/2 inch down and stop a 1/2 inch before it ends. So you can see the two raw edges line up, and then there's a 1/2 inch gap between the seams that I sewed, and then a 1/2 inch-ish gap at the top. Not really, I'll have to seam rip that a bit, but then a 1/2 inch gap at the bottom. Okay, so I just went in and seam ripped out my corners, so there's a 1/2 inch gap where it starts. Now what you do is flip it over to the back side, and it's kind of hard to see because I did my thread in green so that it matches, but you can kind of see where the two seam lines are. What you want to do is carefully snip all along the center of that line, stopping about 3/8 inch from where your seam starts and stops, and then we're going to cut little triangle notches to each side. So I'm going to try to do that so you can see. I'll get my camera in the light better. Okay, that's a lot better. So you can see the line. So we're going to start 3/8 inch from where we start and stop, and then our corner notches. Do this so carefully. I'm going to start from this side so I can make sure I'm doing the center. Okay. Okay, so our next step now is to, after cutting those slits, is to flip the pockets inside. So it's really hard to hold this in a way that you can see. So just flip them right inside. This is what the back side will look like now. And you want to pull the front one so that the band pulls all the way in inside. So you can see where my little triangle notches are. You just tuck those down. So that the band is covering it. Now we're going to hold the back pocket away and just top stitch on this line right here. Just a straight stitch, like 1/8 of an inch away, just to kind of secure it and hold it down. I'm sorry, I know you can't see what I'm doing right now, so I'm trying to explain it as best I can before I start doing it. My kids broke my stand that holds my phone. Okay, so you can see just top stitch right there. Now it's just going to hold it nicely in place. So the next part is a little more important. So I'm going to flip it over so we're looking at the wrong side. And that's where I just top stitched right here. Want to fold your back pocket piece so that it overlays. And then you want to make sure that your notches right here are tucked in. So where we cut the little V's, tuck it under, I'm gonna put a pin in it so that it stays, because it's gonna want to keep flipping out. So pin it there. And then same thing at the top. Tuck the V in. Add a pin. And then just pull it tight. There we go. And now you're gonna top stitch the short side down the long side and then the short side. Okay, so I just sewed along short edge, long edge, short edge. So here's what it looks like from the outside. Everything's being held nicely in place now. This is what it looks like from the inside, so you can see where I just sewed here, here, here. Now I'm gonna take it to my serger and I'm gonna serge around the curve to close the pocket. You can do this on your sewing machine if you prefer. Curves on a serger can be really difficult, but I do this a lot, so I can do it on the serger. But yeah, however you're most comfortable with. Pocket looks like after sewing, I just did the short edge, long edge, short edge. And then if you look at it from the back, you can see where I just sewed. Now what you're gonna do is take it to your serger. You can do it on your sewing machine if you're not good at serging around curves, but I'm just gonna do it on my serger. And you're just going to close off the pocket. So right around there. My tripod is super duper broken, so I'm gonna try to do this, but I might have to put the phone down. Just make sure all of the jacket parts are pulled off so you're not catching any of that in the serger thread. That's it. Okay, so I didn't catch any of the jacket, so that is good news. Then you're just going to weave in your ends. I use an embroidery needle, and I just take the tail and tuck it in and then trim off any excess. Okay, so here's what our pocket looks like now. It's all closed off. Didn't catch any of the jacket in it, and there we go. So cute. So now you're just going to do the exact same thing on the other side, and I'll catch you back after that. Okay, so hopefully everybody made it through those pockets. They're difficult, but if you go slow, pay attention to the directions, and really look at the pictures, you should be able to do it. It definitely is more intermediate to advanced for the pockets, but the rest of the jacket is intermediate, so as long as you can do that, you should be all set. Doing the lining portion of my jacket now, so if you're not doing lining, you do the exact same thing as what I'm doing right now with your main fabric. I'm laying it right sides together, lining it up at the shoulder seams, and then I'm going to take my serger and just serge down both shoulder seams. Okay. Okay, so this is where it starts to get a little different from the typical instructions if you're doing the lined method. So what I just did was I sewed the shoulder seams together, but you also need to sew the side seams shut and then sew your sleeve shut. So we're going to be attaching our sleeve in the round as opposed to the flat method that the instructions call for. So you can do this even if you're not doing the lined method, if you really need the visual to follow along. So you take your sleeve, fold it in half right sides together, and we're gonna sew along the long edge. Okay, and now I'm gonna go ahead and sew my side seam shut on my jacket part. So I already did it on my lining part. I just have to do it on my main fabric. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna change my left needle thread to olive. So the nice thing about it being lined is that you don't see any of the seams inside, so I don't have to change all of these to olive. I only have to change the left needle because that's the needle that you see, or the thread that you can kind of see in the seam ditch when you pull things apart. So here you can see I used white thread, so if I pull it really hard, you can see the white thread peeking through. If I use olive in the left needle, you won't see that, and you don't have to rethread everything because it's the left needle, so it's the last one that you would thread anyhow. So you can interchange it very easily without messing up your serger. Okay, so now you're just going to line up your armpit seams and then serge down to where the waistband is going to go. So just that straight seam right there.
I see a picture.
What you have right now is, it kind of looks like a vest. I'm trying to get the whole thing in the frame. So it's sewn on the sides and at the shoulders, and then we have our armhole open. So our first step is to take our sleeve and flip it right side out. And then right here where we sewed this long straight seam, we're gonna line it up with the side seam of the jacket and pin it in place. And then just work your way all the way around, putting pins. I'm gonna have to flip this inside the sleeve. So like I said, this is my first time doing this method, so I'm working through all the kinks just like you are. There we go. Okay, so you can see that the whole bodice is like inside the sleeve and then coming out the bottom so that it's right sides together. And now we are going to take our lining and we're just going to do the same thing. So we're going to line it up at the armpit. And you want to make sure that you're lining it up the right way. You're using the correct armhole that you used for the main piece. So let me double check that myself. Just kind of hard to do when it's inside out like this. But it does look like it's going to work out, so hopefully it does. Otherwise, I'm going to be seam ripping it open. And so you want to make sure that your right side is touching the wrong side of the sleeve because that technically makes it right side with the main bodice. So your sleeve is now sandwiched between the two bodice layers that are right sides together. And so now this is where it gets like a little odd. So you're going to just pull the bodice all the way through the sleeve so it comes out, and then reach into the sleeve and keep pulling so that the lining pulls through. And there you have it. So now the armhole is completely enclosed. This is called the burrito method. So you can look up other YouTube videos for it too that probably explain it a lot better than I can. I do this when I'm doing sleeveless tops so that there's no like edge showing inside. So yeah, it's just called the burrito method. It's just a way of attaching seams. And look at that, that lined up really nicely. I'm proud of myself there. Okay, so now I'm gonna do the same thing with the other side. Okay, so I just attached my second sleeve the same way I did the first. I have, so you can see my sleeve is fully enclosed, and then I have wrong sides of my shoulder seams going together on each side. So there. All right, everything's attached. So now we're ready to move on to the next step. So for the next step, I'm going to be taking my cuff pieces. Here we go. 2. Okay, so I'm going to put them right sides together. With ribbing, it can be kind of hard to tell what the right side is and what the wrong side is, so you typically can't go wrong. There is a little trick that I've learned though, by using ribbing quite often. If you look at one side and you pull, see how it almost looks a little sparkly? Like you can see the elastic. I don't know if you can see it. That's the wrong side. If you pull on the other side, you're not gonna see that. There's no shininess. So that's the right side. So I'm gonna put that side together and then fold and sew along one long side here. You can do the ham hot method, which is folding it like this and then like this and sewing it right here, which is what I usually do, but for whatever reason, I'm not gonna do it this time. So I'm just gonna come over here, move this into view, serge it right sides together. All right, and then you're gonna fold down so the wrong sides are together, and then you have your cuff. Put it right side together with your sleeve and serge it on. Okay, so now it's time to do the neckband piece. What I did for this was I started at the waistband and rolled it down until the neck, it was in this little section where like the shoulder seam is and then the outside shoulder seam will be. And it's sandwiched all in there, you can see. Rolled up nice and tight so that right sides are together along the neckline. I also cut my lining fabric shorter than the main fabric so that when I flip it over to do buttons, it's not going to be so bulky right here. So I took my pattern piece and I measured from the notch, and that's how much shorter I cut it, and then that's where I started pinning my lining piece together, and that's also the notch that you're going to use to start lining up your neckband. So you want to fold your neckband so that it's right sides together. Wrong sides together, right sides facing out. And then you're gonna start pinning at that point as well. So you're gonna sandwich it in between the 2 layers of the neckband. Again, this is only if you're doing the lining method. If not, you're gonna still use those same notches and start lining up your neckband piece at that same point, but just pretend that this piece isn't here and you're just gonna pin it right sides together all along the neckline of your fabric. I'm just gonna go and check and make sure I caught all the layers because that was really difficult to keep them all lined up. So like right here, I can see I didn't catch the back layer. So I'm just gonna go over that spot again. But it does look like I caught everywhere else. So I'm just gonna do that one spot. All right, so I caught it that time, so we're all good. I'll just weave this in. And because we're lining it, that's gonna be hidden. That I had to go over that seam again, so you won't even see it. It's the beauty of lining this. So now you're just gonna go and you're gonna start pulling your jacket right side out. So just start pulling all of this out from where the neckband is. All right, so now you can see the neckband seam is completely hidden as well, and it's really starting to come together. Okay, so now I have my jacket so that it's laying right side up, or like, you know, like how it would be open. So here's the center seam, here's the center seam, the arms are over here. And you're gonna have, if you're doing waistband method 1, you're gonna have like these little jet outs over here where your waistband attaches. So take your waistband and put it right sides together. And you want it 1/4 of an inch above the raw edge here, so that it's 1/4 of an inch above the raw edge on the insides as well. And then you're going to trim a very small notch right in the corner. It's going to be 1/4 of an inch, just at a little bit of an angle on either side. Then if you're not doing the lining method, you will just sew along right here. If you are doing the lining method, you want to make sure you're sandwiching it again, like always. So you'll flip your lining around. I'll show you how I do that after. I can't do it with one hand, so that it's sandwiched right here with your waistband in between. Okay, so I kind of like flipped my lining so that it's right sides together with the main, with the waistband sandwiched in between. And again, it's 1/4 inch gap there, and then the waistband comes up 1/4 inch, sorry, my finger's in the way, 1/4 inch above right here. And then you're gonna cut a notch and then just sew a straight stitch down here. It'll probably be easier to do with your sewing machine, but if you're really good at accuracy with your serger, you can do it with that too. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so you can see how I sewed along here, and when I got to the notch, I just kind of held the fabric out of the way so it ran off, and it didn't catch any of that notch in there, which is perfect. That's exactly what you want. Now, so we just did right here, so now you're just going to go along the bottom right here. You want to fold it over on itself so it's right sides together. Hold the waistband completely out of the way, just fold it all the way down, and then you're going to fold. If you're just doing it the regular way, you just fold it over on itself. If you're doing it the lining way, the lining will be sandwiched in between there, so the raw edges here are lining up, and then just sew right across. Okay, and you can use your seam ripper or a pin or something to just pop those corners out. Okay, so we got it all turned right side out. Everything lines up nice, and then we're just gonna kind of like flip it back. So now the raw edge of the waistband is lined up with the raw edge of the jacket. And then just pin along that. You might want to find the center first, and then work your way outwards so that you have a nice even stretch. Okay, so now you're going to kind of do what we did with the neckband and push the jacket inside so that we can get right sides together here as well. So now we have right sides together with the jacket pieces, and the waistband is sandwiched in between. So just tuck it all in there. It's not going to be as tight of a fit as the neckband was, which is nice. It gives you a lot more to work with. And now what you want to do with this is exactly where we had the notch before, where it was able to just kind of sew off, is where we're going to pick up and start sewing in this direction. So make sure you stretch the waistband, but do not stretch the jacket. Now you should just be able to go to one of the sides and pull your jacket right side out. And we'll have an enclosed waistband seam. We have enclosed arms and enclosed neckband. So here's what your corners should look like if everything went well. That's why we leave like the 1/2 inch or the 1/4 inch clearance up at the top so that the seam can just go smoothly right off, and then 1/4 inch this way so it can just go smoothly right off. Everything looks good. If it doesn't, it's a pain in the butt to fix without getting any puckering, so really make sure that you're taking your time with this part. The inside is just the same all along. Then we have it fully enclosed all the way down. It looks really good. The last thing to do is to just fold this over, top stitch, and add buttons. Okay, so now here's the outside of our jacket. Here is the inside. I just folded it over and pinned along. You'll want to put interfacing or woven right in here, especially if you're doing buttons. If you're doing snaps, it's not as important, but if you're doing buttons, make sure you do that step. And then I'm just going to top stitch down. I have it on 4.5 stitch length because I like a longer look on a top stitch. And then I'm just gonna go. It's top stitched all the way down. You can see on the inside, top stitch, and then you'll just go ahead and either do buttons or snaps. I'm gonna do snaps on mine. So I won't show you how to do buttons here, but I have done buttons in, let me think which ones I've done, in the cami peplum, and I think there was one other. So you can go and look at those videos for how to do the buttons and buttonholes. For mine, I'm just gonna do snaps.